What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Shooting the Shit Uncensored. I am your host, Piers, and I am really excited to be joined by a fantastic guest today. But before we get into my interview and bring on my guest, I just want to take a couple of short moments just to thank some of our sponsors, the guys that are responsible for us having the lights on here today. First up is A-Rock Designs. A-Rock Designs is a company which is run by my great friend, Ashley Rodriguez in Georgia, United States. They make all the custom wrestling cups, hoodies, keychains, t-shirts, you name it, they make it. They made me this fantastic CM Punk tumbler, which I absolutely love. They've made tumblers for my kids and my wife. The whole family loves them. You got to go check them out on Facebook. Hit up Ashley Rodriguez and she will do you a fantastic deal. Next, my sponsor is Signal Studios. Now, Signal Studios is a recording studio based here in Sydney, Australia. They do absolutely amazing work. If you're an independent professional wrestler, you need a new entrance song to come to the ring and to leave the ring, my boy Rafi can hook that shit up like you will not believe. If you're a musician here in Sydney, you need a place to rehearse, you can head down to Signal Studios. They've got a beautiful facility. It's absolutely amazing, and you can definitely go check it out at affordable prices as well. Also, guys, if you want to support this show just that little bit more, you can head over to our Pro Wrestling Tees store. That's right. It is prowrestlingtees.com/MWA World. You can get this shirt, which I'm wearing, which is the Shooting the Shit Uncensored shirt for this show. We've got our 2020 wrestling shirt, which is our wrestling game show every Wednesday night at 10:30 p.m. Australian time, 8:30 a.m. USA Eastern. You can get the classic black and silver logo MWA shirt, or you can even get the anime shirt with all of our faces. It's absolutely fantastic. We'll make sure to have that banner going up all the way through this interview. So if you do want to head over and get a t-shirt, it is greatly appreciated. And we do have a competition going at the moment where you can win a $50 Amazon gift card and a bonus MWA World shirt. Guys, without further ado, I'm going to bring him on. He is a former NWA and WCW performer. His name is Randy Hogan. Brother, what's going on?
Fierce, brother. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good, man. It's all gimmicked up and everything, brother. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
It is my pleasure. I can't believe I'm all the way in Australia from Florida, USA. Of course, man, I know it's morning there, right? You haven't had lunch yet, have you?
No,
it's
sir.
Bedtime here.
It's 11 a.m., man. My day is pretty much mid-morning.
Yeah. So it's 9 p.m. here.
Oh, damn, man. Well, that's the thing, man. It's like I said, it's Shooting the Shit Uncensored, so I should be past 12 o'clock somewhere in the world having this show on.
Well, that's it. It was 5 o'clock somewhere, about 4 o'clock today, so I'm on a roll.
That's it, man. That's it. Look, thanks for coming on, man. And how you been? Pleasure. How you been going on with all this COVID shit, man? You been keeping safe?
Well, good and bad. The good part is my family and I, we've been avoiding it. So, none of my friends have gotten it, and really nobody in my circle that I really know has come down with the virus. We're lucky. My wife works for a dentist, and they've got, that spit and stuff flying all over the place. So, she's got to be wrapped up like a mummy going to work in that. But, she comes in the back door and takes her work clothes off and throws them right in the washing machine and comes in. And we just wear masks everywhere, and we go out just only when we absolutely have to. So sometimes we got to go grocery shopping and walk the dog, and that's about the extent of it.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same extent for us here as well. It's been some crazy times, but it's just one of those things where the world at the moment is in a very strange place, and this is the new normal for us for at least the foreseeable future.
I know it's over here we have a lot of the wrestling conventions, and they all seem to be from maybe August through November. You'll have a lot of the big major ones here, and they've all been canceled. I think there's one left, the big event, which is in New York City, but that's about ready to fold too. So guys like me that like to work the conventions, we're just sitting home twiddling our thumbs in that. So we have our merchandise that we sell, and there's a lot of auctions going on, and they sell autograph pictures and T-shirts and stuff. But other than that, as far as the wrestling goes, it's really sad for those of us that not only were in it but are still fans. So I like to go to the little independent shows they have around here and talk to some of the young kids coming up and give them a little pointers when I can. But I really miss that. So that's the worst thing about this virus thing. So I hope it clears up before it gets bad again.
Yeah, 100%. But Randy, how did you get into the world of professional wrestling, man? Like when did you start wrestling? And who was your trainer?
I trained by Ted and Jerry Oates. They were a tag team that traveled the world, very big in the Georgia area, in the southern United States in that. Ted Oates was one of the original Hollywood Blondes, which was worldwide. Jerry Oates used to team up with a multitude of people other than his brother, which was like Ronnie Garvin, people like that. And I had been a fan since I was probably 7 or 8 years old, growing up in Detroit, Michigan. My grandparents got me interested. My parents could care less. My grandparents were one of those at edge of the seat. Whenever wrestling was on, boy, it was real, and this was it, you know. So I was raised in that environment with them. So they'd take me to the matches every month. They come in Detroit. Raised with some of the old timers like Bobo Brazil and Dick the Bruiser, the original Sheik, Killer Kowalski, guys of that era, Buddy Rogers, and I saw them all in that. So I had been a fan my whole life, never wavered whatsoever. So as I got into adulthood and got married and things like that, you just go through normal, regular life. And I happened to be, I played in a band, and we traveled around the country. And one place we used to play was a Holiday Inn circuit, and one of the stops was Columbus, Georgia. And every Wednesday night, Georgia Championship Wrestling, which was part of the NWA at the time, with Gordon Soley and that, they did TV tapings. So I'd always go as a fan. And I was in the restaurant business and got moved around, got transferred, ended up in South Florida, was working for a restaurant, and the restaurant closed. And I said, well, okay, what am I going to do now? So I said, I always wondered if this wrestling was real or it was fake. And I had met some of the wrestlers in Columbus, Continental Lover, Eddie Mansfield, and Wahoo McDaniel, and Austin Idol. They would all come through Columbus. And being a fan and knowing every one of them, I got to know a couple of them, Eddie Mansfield in particular. And Jerry Oates owned a gym there in Columbus. So I would go with Eddie to the gym and work out with him. He used to like it because I was staying at the Holiday Inn where we were working, and he could come over because I was there as a guest and use the pool to get himself tanned. So we'd talk about old wrestling stories and stuff, and still didn't know anything about the business because back then it was like magicians, very closed. There was no internet. Kayfabe was pure alive. To get into it, you couldn't go to some backyard or corner market where somebody wants to be a trainer and take your money. You had to know somebody who had to refer you to somebody. Anyways, so they closed the restaurant in South Florida. What do I want to do? Well, I want to see if this wrestling's real or not. I don't want to wrestle. I just want to see if it's real or whatever. So I called Jerry Oates. I said, Jerry, I've been down here in Florida, and I really want to check into wrestling. Do you know anybody down here that trains anybody? And he said, well, down there's only Hiro Matsuda. Now, he trained, of course, Hulk Hogan, Lex Luger, worked with Eddie Graham and Mike Graham and all them. He said, but, I train guys up here. At the time, he was training Marty Jannetty. So I said, well, I know that. So anyways, I talked to him and negotiated. And next thing I knew, all my goods were packed up in my car, and I headed back to Columbus, Georgia. So Ted and Jerry were working together at that time. Jerry had a gym, and he had like an aerobic room in the back. And that's where you trained. We didn't have a ring. You learned how to fall on like a gym mat on a cement floor. So if you don't fall correctly, you're really going to get hurt. So it's like when you get in a real ring, it's almost like being in a mattress compared to where we started. So one day we were doing leapfrogs. just learn how to leapfrog, jump over the guy, run between the legs. And I came down on the side of my ankle. Didn't break it, just sprained it real, real bad. So I was out of it for a while. I didn't get medical attention because I was too tough for that. So I wrapped it up and iced it and put all that Ben Gay crap on it and everything. So I was out for about 3 or 4 months. Well, but I wanted to come back. His brother Ted Oates now had opened up a regular wrestling school in a storefront. He had a ring and everything. So I went over to Ted's and talked to Ted. And started training over there. Like I said, Marty Jannetty had been over there and some other guys had passed through. And I almost had tears in my eyes the first time I stepped inside a real wrestling ring. I mean, here I was this little 8-year-old kid again, looking in awe. And here I am now standing in a ring. Now I couldn't do nothing. I didn't know nothing. So I started training. And I trained for about 13 months, over a year. And then they had the students put on a benefit for the police athletic league. And we just wrestled each other in that. So I was finally going to get in a match. Now, old school, when they taught you how to wrestle, you start with basics. Lockups, how to fall backwards, how to fall forward, how to protect yourself. But you didn't do any punching, you didn't do any kicking. There was no high flying, no top rope stuff, none of that. It was pure mat wrestling. And I think that's a lot the difference in today's market as opposed to back then, as there was more wrestling. And today there's a lot more other stuff. Anyways, we'll get into that later. So I went through that and had my first match. And I said, okay, I did it. It's fun. That's it. So I backed out. Now, I still went to the matches every Wednesday night at the Columbus Auditorium. So I went one Wednesday, and a kid I was training with was setting up the ring. I hadn't seen him in a while. Wild Bill Smith, his name was. And I said, Bill, what are you doing? He says, well, they rent this ring from me when they do the TV tapings here. And we just talked, and he said, are you doing anything? And I said, well, I'm not doing anything. I'm just enjoying what I'm watching. And he says, well, I'm wrestling in this little bar up in North Georgia. He says, why don't you come watch me sometime? I said, I'd love to. And he said, bring your stuff. And I said, no, I'm not going to bring my stuff. I'm just going to come watch you. So I went a couple of weeks in a row. And then one week I brought my bag. Kiss of death right there. Somebody didn't show up. Now, this is a bar that had maybe 30 guys in it, okay, and the ring in the middle of it. So somebody didn't show up. So they say, Randy, do you want to work? I said, well, yeah, okay, I will. They say, okay, you're going to wrestle this guy named the Animal, and he's going to go over. I said, okay, great. So I get back in the locker room, and my buddy Bill, I said, what's going over mean? Does that mean like he's going over the top rope? Or I'm going over the top? What do you mean? That's how green we were. I knew how to wrestle, but I didn't know anything else other than the wrestling part of it.
Yeah.
So anyways, I wrestled this guy named the Animal, and of course he called a match, and it went very well. And I was all excited. First time I got to wear my boots in a real match and my trunks and everything. And my dad's name was Frank, so I wrestled as Randy Franklin. I always had the mustache, had the long hair, the tan, but it was dark brown hair, just about your color.
Yeah.
So the promoter comes up and he says, good. He says, you come back next week? I said, yeah, I'll come back next week. Great. Now I was going to get paid. This is like maybe a $20 payoff. I mean, this was big money for me now. I'm getting paid to wrestle. So he said, but this Hulk Hogan guy's coming up. And he was coming up because this was, late 70s, early 80s. He says, we're going to call you Hal Hogan, and you're going to be his nephew or his cousin.
Yeah.
I says, oh, well, I don't know who they're talking about. So you want to do the Hogan thing. Okay, but can I be Randy? Which was my name. He says, okay, you're going to be Randy Hogan. Great. So I went home, got my girlfriend and said, you got to bleach my hair. So now I bleached my eyebrows, my mustache, my hair. I had a tan anyways and everything. So I'm back as Randy Hogan. I wrestled a guy to a draw, a Broadway, as we called it. And then, can you come back the next week? Yeah. So now I went over. Not over the top rope. I actually won the match. So he common courtesy when you're on a card and there's a lot of other wrestlers that you don't know, and you get to know them and you support them. So, hey, where are you working next week? Where are you working? And you go. When you go see one of these guys, again, it was common courtesy that they would introduce you to the promoter. No other reason than to make the introduction, you know?
Yeah.
And so I started going around, and the Hogan thing started going, even though I never portrayed myself as Hogan's brother, cousin, nephew, relative, nothing. I had turquoise trunks and boots. I had a black velvet robe that was sequined with a turquoise lining and everything. Nothing to do with the Hulk Hogan thing. So I'm working on a show with a guy from Alabama called Mike Jackson, Action Mike Jackson, who was the self-proclaimed junior heavyweight champion for, I don't know, 30 years. In fact, he was on AEW about a month ago at almost 70 years old and really did a good match.
Yeah.
So anyways, at that time, of course, Mike, he was the big name. So he was main event, and I was in the semi-main. I said, Mike, I'm still green. I've had matches, but I don't know anybody. He says, Mike, how do you get on TV? And he says, I take guys up to TV once in a while and try to get them on. He was like a booker's booker, any of the jobbers, as they call it, enhancements, whatever you want to call us. Any of that, Mike would bring them up, and they'd pay him $150, and we'd get $50. And but wow, we were on TV. So that's how that got started. So my very first match was on TV with the Barbarian and the Warlord. And the Barbarian speaks very broken English, Tongan or like Samoan.
Yeah.
So he goes to shoot me in the ropes, and he says, Bibu. Now, I don't know what the hell he said, but I'm full of adrenaline. First time on TV. So I hit them ropes going 100 miles an hour, come off not knowing what's happening. Next thing I know, I got a size 15 in my face. Blood goes everywhere. Nose cracks. So what happened is he was saying big boot. Like, shoot me in the ropes, watch for the big boot. Boo. Yeah. I didn't know what that meant. I got a busted nose out of it. So J.J. Dillon was doing he was running the locker room, doing the bookings and that. And I guess they felt sorry for me. He says, Hogan, can you come back next week? And I says, okay. I don't know why, but yeah, I will. So that's how I started going with NWA every week on TV. And as they get to know you, the guys you're working, the name guys, they get to trust us. Some don't have any respect for the jobbers. Others, they know that we are the star makers, basically.
Yeah.
So they would, a lot of them treat us with respect, but you got to know some of them. And they liked to work with you. They liked me because I was smaller. I mean, I was about a little over 220. Not real big, but I could take a bump anywhere. I don't care. Do whatever you want to me, like a rag doll. I don't care. Well, they like that because there's so many whiny little bitches in this business, especially back then.
Mm.
I always, with respect, thanked them for the match, even if I got beat up or whatever. So guys like Sting, Lex Luger, Jimmy Cornette, the Midnight Express, Kevin Sullivan, they always wanted to work with me now because they knew they could do whatever, and I'd do whatever, and I wouldn't complain. So little did I know that's how you keep your job. It's like any other job. If you're complaining all the time, they're going to get rid of you.
Exactly. Shut your fucking mouth and do what you're there to do.
Yes. So I woke up the next day, and all of a sudden, Ted Turner, WCW, had bought out Crockett's NWA. Well, now they wanted guys that knew how to wrestle, because back in the original job days, you just got in there and you did nothing. You just were a piece of
squash.
A squash match, yes. WCW wanted guys that actually could work, given the chance. So it was almost like an audition thing. And many of the guys never made it back. Guys like George South, myself, Italian Stallion, I think, Bob Cook. There was a bunch of us that got kept on because we could work. why they wanted that is if I was in there with somebody like Vader, for instance, and they're trying to make him into this unstoppable monster, you're going to get jobbed out. You're not going to get no spots. You're not going to get nothing. You're just going to get killed. But they might put you in a match with a Brad Armstrong or like a Ricky Steamboat type of person where you could actually show skills, and they wanted to see a wrestling match. So that's why we kept on, because we could swim in any pond, and that kept me going right along until I was working a TV match against Rick Steiner in Savannah, Georgia, and I had wrestled him before, and he used to be famous for his belly-to-back suplexes.
Yeah.
Well, I had taken 2 or 3 of them. I was landing on my head. So I said, well, I'm going to turn a little bit. He went behind me, turned, hit my shoulder, cracked my clavicle.
Oh.
Felt like I'd never been shot, but I guess it feels like you've been shot.
Yeah.
So, nobody knows what's going on. So the ref's right there, and I said, ref, it's my shoulder. I said, take it home, which means I'm hurt. Let's get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
So he tells Rick Steiner, and Steiner, of course, didn't really know, so he threw me in and just gave me a power slam, and that felt like getting shot again. So that was pretty much the end of my full-time NWA, WCW stuff. This was over a 4 or 5 year span.
Yeah.
So I moved down to Florida to heal up and says, what am I going to do now? Well, the only experience I had was in restaurants and bars and stuff. So I went to work for a restaurant again. And they decided to close that restaurant. And I says, wait, don't close it. Let me buy it. They said, well, we don't have a franchise program. I said, well, let's start one. So anyways, I bought my first restaurant, my second restaurant, actually. It was called Randy Hogan's Cedar River Seafood. Now, I became like a Ronald McDonald because the newspaper picked up, Cedar River Seafood bought by wrestler Randy Hogan. So now little kids, mom and dad would say, where do you want to go have dinner? Oh, let's go see Randy Hogan. Because I'd give him a little 5x7 picture, and I'd sit and tell him stories about this guy, about that guy, whatever,
Yeah.
And work for business. So now I said, well, I need to keep this Hogan thing alive. So at this time, WCW started doing TV tapings now at Disney, MGM Studios. So I made a couple of calls, and when they taped, I started doing TV taping again at MGM. So I'd still be on TV, and then they come to my restaurant. Now I'm a TV star again. What the heck? Buy an extra piece of fish, and we're happy. And that just carried me right on through. And through the years, I've had 6 different restaurants. Sold my last one 10 years ago. Got married, moved to Orlando, and here I am. All of a sudden, there's an interest now in the old guys, nostalgic. So I got a call to do a convention. And I said, well, I never did one, but yeah, that sounds like fun. They says, well, okay, do the Hogan gimmick. I says, well, I really don't have a Hulk Hogan gimmick, but I can sure put one together. So the first one I went to was it's called The Big Event in New York City, which is one of the biggest ones in the world, I guess. The Undertaker was there, and Braun Strowman, and just a lot of the biggest games. There was about 80 talents there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I went from there, and then the next day we had another convention, which was WrestleFest 3, which is in Albany, New York, about 3 hours away, did the same thing. So I'm almost done with all this.
No, keep going, man. Keep going.
One of the questions people ask me all the time is, what does Hulk Hogan think of you? Have you ever met Hulk Hogan? Okay. Well, in all actuality, when I had my restaurant, just before I had bought it down here, I was working for a radio station.
Yeah.
And I had a little 3-minute segment on the sporting channel, a wrestling. Now, back then, they just had the dirt sheets, the Wrestling Observer and things like that. So I get information out of that, and then I'd go on TV. And they didn't know who I was, or on the radio, I should say, as the chameleon. And I'd say, yeah, did you hear about this? Terry Taylor did this, and Blackjack Mulligan got in a fight with this guy in the locker room. And so I did that. So now Hulk Hogan had jumped from WWF to WCW, and in Disney they had a big, like a ticker tape parade for him.
I remember that. I remember that was massive back then.
It was massive.
Huge.
So they said, well, you wrestle. I says, yeah. They says, why don't you go? We'll get you a press pass and you could be a legit reporter. So I went. And I was standing right in front of the stage, him, Jimmy Hart, and I still had I was in street clothes, but I had the long blonde hair and the same old thing going on. And I was right in front, and he looked at me, and he looked back and just kind of gave a little nod. To me, that was vindication. I'm okay now,
Yeah.
And he only lives an hour from me to this day, and I have never met him face to face. So, bring me back to the big event last New York.
Yeah.
Who is right across from me? The table across from me was Jimmy Hart, sitting with J.J. Dillon. Now, I said, well, God, I know the relationship between Hart and Hogan. I said, what's he going to think? I was a little bit nervous. And I said, what the hell? So, slow time, I went over. I said, Jimmy, could I get a picture taken with you? He said, sure, brother, come on. And we took a couple of pictures, and couldn't have been nicer. And I said, thank you so much. I said, I was a little bit worried, because I'm kind of doing this. And he says, hold on. He says, I talk to Terry Hulk every day. He says, we've got businesses together outside of wrestling. He said, and not that you're the top of the conversation, but you have come up because of the TV and everything else. And he said, both of us are proud of what you're doing. You've never gotten in any controversies and bad stuff. When he went NWO, I turned heel at the same time. I kind of followed him without any relationship. So Jimmy said, I love the outfit. He said, you keep doing what you're doing. He says, Terry's okay with it. He says, and I'm all for it. So finally I got it after all those years.
Wow.
So
and that must have been like almost like a real like sort of accomplishment to have that sort of like stamp of approval from the man, because obviously in the world of wrestling, when you not imitate, when you take elements of someone else's gimmick, and it's probably more so back from the years prior, that's a big no-no in the world of wrestling. But obviously for you not to even have a conversation with him about it, but then these years later to then finally get that stamp of approval from obviously Jimmy Hart and Hulk, must have meant the world.
Yeah, and they had an article back at Pro Wrestling Illustrated with a picture of me and Jimmy Cornette and Hulk Hogan and Fred Blassie. He's doing his pose and Blassie's holding up the 24-inch pythons. Okay, 24 centimeters. They told me make an ugly face, and strike this kind of pose, and it was a whole article. Anyways, after 31 years, I finally got a copy of that about a month ago, and I'm having run-off copies. So I'm gonna sell the pictures. Anyways, but the Hogan whole thing was, I said when I went to New York, they said bring the Hogan type gimmick. So I said, okay. So really, I never did the Hulk Hogan imitator, gimmick, whatever else. I never did that. I can't help it. He looks like me, I can't help that. I'm older, so he looks like me. But anyways, it just took off, and now I'm doing, all the conventions I get a hold of, and some of the world top podcasts like yours, and it just where were they when I needed them 30 years ago,
Exactly. But
on, like, brother.
When you started using the Hogan name, was there anyone that sort of pulled you aside and said, hey, man, you shouldn't be doing this? Or was there any sort of heat from it at all?
Absolutely never. He's good friends with the Nasty Boys. Brian Nobden. I worked them a bunch of times, never mentioned. What I heard through the grapevine was a lot of jobbers, what do you call them over there? Jobbers, enhancement people, carpenters, star makers.
I mean,
whatever.
We call them the same here that you guys do over there.
I'm not offended by any of them. But anyways, I don't know where I was going with this. I'm getting old.
You were saying about the Nasty Boys. You had a match
Oh,
with
yeah.
them.
I'm sorry. I'm thinking ahead of myself. Like Brian Knobson, I never said anything. But what I found out is as Hogan was coming up in the WWF, he was a hero. Okay.
Yeah.
And they had these wars going on now, WCW, the Monday Night Wars, WWF. So I was one of the few jobbers that they didn't change my name. They kept me as a Hogan with the same gimmick and everything. And they beat my brains out every week. I was doing the job, but there was a reason for it because that was one subtle way they were showing superiority over the Hogans of North. This is your hero, or we'll show you what we do to Hogans down here. And I don't care. We used to have a saying, pin me, pay me. And that's basically what it was. So,
Yeah, pin me, pay me, shut up, and go to the next town. So
yes,
it's very much that old school mentality. But did you obviously when you started in your career, you started in a time, as you said, where kayfabe was very much alive and well, and breaking into the world of wrestling in the 70s and 80s. It was like pulling teeth, where you essentially, for our viewers who don't know, back then there was not it wasn't flooded with wrestling schools and training centers like it is today. Back in the 70s and 80s, it was very much a hard industry to break into. You either had to know someone or you had to be related to someone who was in the business.
absolutely.
And that's the thing. Like for me, I wanted to ask you, was like breaking into that world, in the 70s and 80s, did you ever have to, obviously turning up, were you put through the ringer a few times to see how bad you really wanted it, really test your
in training,
your
yes.
metal? Yeah.
Yeah, in training they did. That was the old school mentality. They tried to beat you down. Hiro Matsuda broke Hulk Hogan's leg his third week of training.
Yeah,
Literally broke his leg, and then that's common fact on that. They did because they didn't want any pretty boy sissies or nothing. This was just when Lex Luger was coming up, and he was one of the down in the South states. He was one of the first muscled up guys where you had like a Billy Graham up north. But guys like Luger that were just so muscled up and stuff, the old school guys weren't like that. You get out in front of the crowd and you're in front of the crowd, you're not pulling punches, nothing. You don't smack somebody in the head with a chair or a 2x4 or something else. And you're going to hit them, you're going to lay into it because that's what you get paid for. You're not a stunt man. You're paid to, back then as today, to tell a story, whatever that storyline may be, whether it's making somebody into a beast, or leading up to the next match or whatever else. But the storylines are so much different back then than today. And they wanted to be sure that, first of all, you were tough enough, that you weren't going to be a crier and a whiner, that if you got the opportunity, because the first thing you go to a promoter, they say, back then, they say, okay, well, who trained you? Well, if I screw up, then that goes back on my trainer. And then I really get heat, down the road. So that was the biggest difference is I think they wanted to be sure you were tough enough to do it. Now, you didn't have no junior heavyweights as such. You had a couple of light guys, but like in my case, they wouldn't even think of start training you unless you were at least 200 pounds or above. Now you got a whole roster of guys that are $165, 175, 180. All these skinny little guys.
But that's the world of wrestling. That's the world of wrestling that's evolving with the times, though. You look at pro wrestling now. It's now put into more of a thing where you look at boxing and MMA. You don't just have only heavyweights. You've got lightweights. You've got welterweights. I don't think wrestling is going to go down into weight divisions. I think that would be probably a little bit too much, but I think that having
remember they always had the heavyweight champion and the junior heavyweight champion.
But they still do. But I don't think they're going to have 10 different weight divisions like having a welterweight pro. You know what I mean? I think that would be a bit too convoluted. But you look at the world of the evolution of pro wrestling from what it was from the 70s to 2020. It's had to evolve over time because not and I think it's still believable because the fact is that you look at it, it's like not every man walking the street is 6'6" and 300 pounds. You know what I mean? Like it gives that element of like extra. I don't want to say realism because I think it was there was a lot of realism back then, but I think it's just the way that culture is evolved, and I think wrestling's evolved with culture.
I agree. And some of it's good and some of it's bad. And I don't want to sound like one of them old guys that say, oh, old school is the best, and there's nothing going on now. But back then, if for credibility, you had to look like a wrestler. You had to be bigger. You didn't want to be sitting in a bar next to a guy 170 pounds and he ends up being, Finn Balor or somebody, and you don't know who he is. If a wrestler in the old days walked into a bar or a restaurant, you knew he was somebody, because they were so big. Now that's been very homogenized. Yeah. Just so many different comparisons to what it was and what it is. And yes, it's evolved. Some of us old guys think it's not necessarily evolved in the best of ways, but there are some remarkable things going on. We would never think of jumping through a table or coming off a balcony or jumping off top of a cage onto somebody back in the old days. Now, everybody is doing all these monkey spots, as we call it. Everybody's got to get their stuff in. A super kick means nothing because everybody does it. Anything off the top rope nowadays is just another move. If you came off the top rope in the old days, that was a finish, period. Yeah. You didn't kick out of somebody's finisher. Now, everybody kicks out of everybody's finisher. It just things like that have changed. The whole storyline goes.
But I think the guys kicking out of finishes, it's more of like in those big match moments, in that big thing where it's like, the false finishes and stuff like that. I don't think necessarily you see like on an episode of weekly wrestling television, you're going to see guys kicking out of finishes. Because if you do, then it's not a finisher. It's just a move. It's a setup to something else. But one thing I wanted to ask you, because you were involved in wrestling in a time where it was probably less PC. Guys were, drinking on the drugs. Was that something that you saw quite a lot of in your time? With guys using drugs and alcohol.
Yes. Well, the biggest drug I guess they had back then was the steroids. I mean, they were doing other stuff also, not in the locker room, not in the open. But steroids were everywhere. I mean, everybody had them in their bag, and guys would be shooting this or popping this or doing that. Some guys would come to work not necessarily in the best of shape all the time, and some injuries hurt, and some people got fired for that and that. But it was very, very prevalent back then. They had no drug testing or anything, and to wrestle regularly, you had to be bigger. And if you were a guy like me that's normally about 200, 210 pounds, for me to get up to 230, 235, it took some enhancement drugs. And we're steroids. And everybody did them. And the worst thing about them was they worked. That was the worst thing about them. They didn't know years later, as people like Lex Luger and dozens of others have found out, the damage that they were actually doing. All we knew is they were helping build you had to work out, but they were helping build your muscles quicker and bigger, and that's what we wanted. But then you got a lot of them falling by the wayside.
It's almost like they thought it was like the magic pill. Take this pill and you're going to grow.
It was a magic pill because they didn't know enough about them at the time. They didn't know it's going to screw up your heart and your kidneys and your liver and everything else. Look at Lex Luger, ended up in a wheelchair. Now he weighs about 170 pounds. Guys aren't around anymore. Like Road Warrior Hawk. Go on and on with guys.
Dynamite Kid.
Yes.
Prime example. He was a guy that wasn't a big guy in stature and abused the juice and everything like that. And then he was confined to a wheelchair and and it fucked him mentally as well. So you look at guys that have just have lost it from the mind as well, from years of abuse of this stuff.
Yes. because if this works, then I'm going to take more and it's going to work better. And I'll take more and it'll work better. And then they start stacking it 2, 3, 4 different things, you know, and they didn't know everything is going into your insides and just ripping you apart, you know. And then 10 years down the road, you end up like, your hips are gone, your knees are gone, everything else is gone because it eats away at the cartilage and everything else. Your muscles, in some cases, gotten so big and strong that your skeletal frame cannot bear the weight. And you have guys doing squats and their leg would just break, you know, or doing benches in the same way. All of a sudden, their forearm would break.
But it also comes down to, like, you know, the human body as well is not meant to lift large amounts of weight. And then obviously it can because the human body is strong, but, you know, taking that steroid as well and the constant lifting of that weight and putting that pressure on the joints and the muscles. And, you know, you look at guys like Hulk Hogan, you know, as you said, Lex Luger, the list goes on and on and on about some of these guys that, you know, obviously for years were abusing, but also working out and lifting that level of weight and lifting heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier because they could. You know, ultimately that is what's sort of screwed them in the end because their bodies were just falling apart.
Well, if you look at Hogan now, he walks with a cane. You know, he's had 10 back surgeries. He's had hip replacements. He's had knee. I've had both knees replaced. And a week from yesterday, I'm going in to have a full ankle replacement.
Jesus.
Which I got 30 some odd years ago, learning to do leapfrogs. Came down on the side of my foot and cracked it. And now that I'm getting older with the arthritis setting in and everything else, so I'm going to get a full replacement. The only guy I know of that has ever had a full ankle replacement has been Jimmy Snuka. Superfly had a replacement.
Jesus.
But so that's what I'm going in for. But again, it's part of the cost of what we did for what we love doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, when you're on, did you ever do like long periods away from being away from home and away from the family, like with WCW and NWA, like being on the road, you know, because how much does that tax your body as well?
Well, that depends on how much partying you like to do. That's the big part of it. You know, you do your match, you go back, you get something to eat, you maybe have a beer and you go to bed. It's okay. I was single at the time, so I didn't have to worry about the family or things like that. So I had a 12-year run when I was single. Most of that was all wrestling time. So, but there's a lot of guys who would stay out all night and drink and drug and everything else and then get up and have to go to work the next day. And that was a way of life for some, and some of them just couldn't let go, and they continue that into their, as I call, their adult life. And a lot of them aren't around anymore.
Yeah, it's a sad. That's the thing, man. Pro wrestling is such an amazing show. It's you know obviously some shows are better than the others, but it's sad that so many and so many people that have been involved in this business have gone so soon at such a young age. And it just comes down to obviously, how hard they like to party and no one really policing it from a company standpoint. There's
had a lot to do. Had a lot to do with it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that you look at and we talked about how wrestling's evolved, and you look at now where they've got wellness policies and drug tests and physiotherapists and doctors on hand and stuff like that. Do you think that guys from the generation previously, if they had all this stuff accessible to them back then, it would have been a different story for them?
I believe it would have changed a lot of lives. Yes, I do. I think you would have seen, like you do now, some of the smaller guys that could actually wrestle getting a chance, where back then they didn't. The first guy, the little guy that I remember that really got a chance or a highlight was Rey Mysterio when he beat the Big Show for the world title, WWF, I think it was, before WWE. But he was the first of the little guys that actually got some credentials out of it. But in the early days, you just didn't have that many little guys. They were all men's men. They were all bigger and gruffer and a lot of ways tougher. But then again, you got guys making millions of dollars a year right now. That didn't happen back in them days.
Yeah, I mean, exactly right. I mean, these days it's like, how many big guys are there on a main roster? Like, there's probably like a small handful compared to what the rest of the roster has.
Oh,
so
sure.
It's definitely a different time altogether. So,
but guys that even like in NXT, the first time they're getting a shot, they're bringing them in, and just to train, they're paying them like $500 a week, and then they get on the little roster, they're making $50,000. Now that's $50,000 a year is not bad for a young kid that's doing exactly what he wants to do. And then, depending how he shines, man, that can jump into millions. So, and look at how many are turning into actors also. So now there was no place to go in the old days. Once you were done wrestling, you were done. You better have a backup. Now look at how many guys going into movies. From Piper to Cena to The Rock to Edge, The Miz. A lot of guys and a lot of guys are getting part-time stunt work and stuff in movies and that. You didn't have those opportunities back in the day. And that makes a big difference.
Yeah, and I think it's probably just the world's evolving of it as well. Like you're seeing there's more media, there's more stuff. These guys are household names essentially. With pro wrestling, it's still. I think pro wrestling's gone through that boom again, and I've said this before. Like every 10, 15 years, wrestling goes through a boom, and it's kind of like the ebbs and flows. You know what I mean? Yep. And I think right now it's going through that boom. Obviously pre-COVID and once COVID sort of comes to an end, we're going to see a lot more when we start seeing more live shows. I think that boom will continue depending on how well that they really captivate the audience with that product and obviously the different companies that are going around. But pre-COVID,
they're trying to be creative with that now, of ways that they can either simulate a crowd or they're doing the social distancing thing. I saw an independent show not long ago that drew over 1,000 people, but they had little like pedestals that held 4 people, individual, set up.
Yeah.
And they kept the distance in that, so they could do that. So they're getting creative. They're doing more and more. The WWE, like SummerSlam, is here in Orlando this coming Sunday. And they're talking about letting a minimal amount of people in because now instead of the Performance Center, which is just a wrestling school, basically, this arena will seat 12,000 people. So they can distance them around so they can still have the reaction of a live audience, even though there's not going to be the full capacity that they normally would have had. So the creativity is what's going to really make the difference in the next year.
What do you think of cinematic matches that we've seen? We've seen at WrestleMania this year. We've seen like the cinematic stuff.
I can't get past the old school thinking on that. It ain't wrestling. That's the bottom line. Now, they're fun to watch. They're interesting. They keep the kids involved. Kids like to see that stuff, and that's where spending the money now. People my age aren't spending money on wrestling and stuff. You don't even have to pay for pay-per-views. You pay $9.99 a month or whatever it is, and you get all your free pay-per-views.
And that's the thing, I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about the WrestleMania cinematic match with AJ and Undertaker.
Yes.
And I was asked, what do you think of the match? I said, if I was watching a TV series, if I was watching a TV show or a movie, that would have been a great fight scene.
I agree.
It wasn't wrestling.
I agree. Totally agree.
It wasn't wrestling. And I think it's nothing on the talents. Sometimes you got to be given chicken shit and turn it into chicken salad yourself. And I think that they definitely did the best. But, the cinematic stuff are just, it's not my cup of tea.
It's not wrestling. See, I'm not in the old days when they had territories. Okay.
Yeah.
they would have storylines, but that story would carry over from territory to territory. Building up, and everything else. So they had the storylines that acted out like that, and you had like Kevin Sullivan had his Dungeon of Doom and all these freaky characters and stuff, but it's like you said, the business has evolved in so many different ways, and the cinematic thing is one of it. WWE is big in producing movies now. They produce all are involved in their studios and that. So it's an easy thing for them, I think, to slip into.
Oh, absolutely. But guys, look, it is that time of the show where we do play our little game called Guess the Aussie Slang. So, Randy, have you ever been to Australia before?
No, but I love them little baby koala bear looking things.
You mean these things?
Yeah, that thing. That's it.
So, all right, we're going to play an Aussie slang game. How this works, ladies and gentlemen, is I'm going to say a slang word. I'm going to put it in a sentence for Mr. Randy Hogan, and he's going to tell me what that word means.
Oh, man.
Or I'm going to use a slang. Okay. Hey, Randy.
Yeah.
You want a stubby? Stubby. What am I offering you, Randy?
I'm sorry. I'm not homosexual.
Stubby is a beer. It's like have a beer. All right, so this is going to be a multi-point one. I'm going to use different words. The words are going to be franger, old fella, and Sheila. All right.
Okay.
So here it is. Hey, Randy, you got yourself a franger? I need it for me old fella. I just picked up a Sheila.
Wow. You got yourself a hooker that the old man picked up on the street or something. I don't know.
What's a franger?
I don't know.
All right.
A hooker?
No. A franger is a condom. And my old fella is my dick, and a Sheila is a woman.
Wow.
So I need
my mind was in the right place. I just had a wrong terminology, huh?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Wow.
Oh, mate, where's your dunny at? Dunny.
My dunny?
Yeah.
My dunny. I think my wife keeps it in her nightstand next to the bed.
I would be surprised. A dunny is a toilet.
Oh, really? Yeah. This is great.
All right. Next is bogan. Me Uncle Ron's over, and he's a bit of a bogan.
Well, when he got run over, the car stopped on top of him, and he lifted it up like a Hogan.
No, bogan.
But he was a bogan.
Yeah.
Well, he wasn't a Hogan, so he had to be a bogan.
A bogan is like an Australian redneck.
A hillbilly.
Yeah, like a real, hang on, mate, you're going to go down the road, have a few fucking schooner. Yeah, so that's what it is.
Welcome to Florida.
All right. Oh, mate, I'm feeling dusty.
Dusty.
Feeling
sick.
Dusty. Yeah, feeling unwell. Usually after a big night on the booze.
Hungover.
Yeah. Hey, mate, you want to come over to my house and drink some piss?
Beer.
That's it. Okay. All right. Oh, mate, that was a bit of a hard yakka. That was hard yakka.
A hard yakker.
A hard yakka.
A tough job.
Yeah, hard work. Hard work. All right, so we've got a couple more. We'll go. Budgie smuggler. Fuck, Dad's outside and he's wearing his budgie smuggler again.
Budgie smuggler. Oh, man. Coveralls?
No, a Speedo, because once you get in the water and you get out, it looks like you're smuggling a budgie.
Oh, man.
All
It's
right,
neat.
so,
I like it.
all right. We got a couple more. We'll go for you. That Sheila is a slapper. Slapper.
She's hot.
It kind of means like she's a slut. She's a lowy. You know, she's gives it up for the boys, so to speak.
Oh, a rat.
Yep. All right. So
Gotcha.
next one is root rat.
A root rat.
A root rat.
A root rat, like a gopher.
A root rat is someone who likes to go and always on the hunt for sex. Like just I got to pick up. I got to get this person.
A root rat.
A root rat, yeah. So it's like if I say, like in America, you say you're rooting for someone, it means like you're cheering for someone, right?
Yes.
In
Yes.
Australia, root has a completely different meaning.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So if I say I'm rooting for you, it basically means I'm fucking for you.
Oh,
Like, you know what I mean? Like that's why if you come to Australia and say I'm rooting for you, guys will just be like, "You're gonna do what?" But Randy, that's the Aussie slang game. Thanks for playing, man. It's always
that was so very interesting.
Thank you so much. But Randy, why don't you tell everyone where they can find you, where they can find you on social media, and where you're going to be next?
Well, because of the virus, I don't know where I'm going to be next. I hate to say that. It looks like through the end of the year, there's going to be absolutely nothing. Like I said, I'm getting my ankle operated on next week, and then that'll keep me down probably till the first of the year anyways. But I can be found on Facebook. That's about the only place I am. I have merchandise on there, Randomania shirts.
Check
glasses.
it out, brother.
I got everything. And just on Facebook, just look up Randy Hogan or Randy. My last name is Muehl. Either one will get you there. And my whole life is there. My personal life, my business life, I share it all.
That's it, man. What a great dude. Randy, I will get you to hold on. Don't disconnect just yet. Let me wrap the show up and we'll talk backstage. But
Great.
guys, thank you so much for watching Shooting the Shit Uncensored. My name is Piers Austin. Randy, thank you so much for joining us. Guys, as well, I just wanted to take the moment to thank my sponsors again. I'd just like to thank A-Rock Designs, Signal Studios. And again, guys, if you want to support this product, you want to support Multi-Continental Wrestling Alliance, head over to our Pro Wrestling Tee store, which is prowrestlingtees.com/MWA World, which is just at the bottom banner there. And guys, we'll see you back in a couple of days. I'm going to be sitting down with Sunny Beach, and I'm really looking forward to that one as well.
Sunny Beach.
The man himself. But guys, thank you very much for watching. Randy, thank you again, and we'll catch you again, guys, in a couple of days.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Talk soon, man.